This is social media literally on trial.
In a Los Angeles courtroom, Meta and Google are accused of engineering addiction to hook kids on their social media platforms.
They're saying that you intentionally designed your products to be harmful in this way and keep users on there as long as possible.
Could this spell the end of the infinite scroll? From WNYC in New York, I'm Brooke Gladstone.
And I'm Micah Loewinger. Also on this week's show, how some of the efforts to make social media safer for kids is affecting the rest of us.
All of a sudden, we're in a world where you have to show some sort of identification to go onto a lot of the portions of the internet.
Plus, a look at the billion-dollar industry turning the news into a game.
What is the price of the Democrats will take control of the House? Is it 50 cents? Is it 60 cents? Is it 75 cents?
It's all coming up after this.
On the Media is supported by Dell. Ready to save on new tech? It's time for Dell Tech Day's annual sales event, celebrating our customers with fantastic deals and benefits. Perks include Dell Rewards, free shipping, premium support, and more. PCs like the Dell 14 Plus with Intel Core Ultra processors will help you do more faster. And with a premium suite of monitors and accessories, you can upgrade your whole setup with amazing savings. Visit Dell.com/deals. WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
From WNYC in New York, this is On the Media. I'm Micah Loewinger.
And I'm Brooke Gladstone. This week, a landmark lawsuit against big tech went to trial.
This is social media literally on trial. Platforms like Instagram and YouTube accused of being harmful to children and designed to be addictive.
The now 20-year-old plaintiff alleging the apps targeted her as a minor with harmful and depressive content, leading to self-harm.
This is the first trial of several coming this year.
To be precise, this is one of around 2,500 personal injury lawsuits being brought at the state level. At the federal level, there are another 800 or so, as well as a slew of cases being brought by attorneys general and school districts that claim they've experienced harm as a result of their students being addicted to social media. But this one, the one that went to trial this week, is called a bellwether because
the resolution of this case here is going to help inform lawyers, litigants, how they're going to resolve all of these other cases.
Madlin Mekelburg is a legal reporter at Bloomberg. She spent the week in that LA courtroom when I spoke to her Thursday, and she began by describing Kaylee, the plaintiff who was a minor when the alleged harm happened, and so is only being identified by her first name.
What we've heard from her lawyers is that as a result of her addiction to social media, she's experienced depression, anxiety, body dysmorphia. In fact, she's so anxious and having such a hard time with this that they're not allowing her to appear in the courtroom at all until she's called to testify.
Now, she's signing on to something they call a master complaint?
Yes, one big master complaint compiled by these lawyers. Individual plaintiffs can sign on to the master complaint.
And a bit like the opioid cases across the country.
They're getting a lot of comparison to those kinds of cases, to big tobacco cases, because they're being handled in the same way, and it's around this same issue, alleging individual injury because of a product.
And you've observed that they're using a novel legal theory. What makes the plaintiff's legal argument so novel?
Social media companies in past litigation have cited a federal law that shields them from liability when it comes to content that's produced on their platform.
The infamous Section 230.
Exactly. That's what's so unique about this lawsuit. They're trying to sidestep Section 230 completely by saying this is not about the content. This is about the design of the platform, and more specifically, the algorithm. They're able to talk about how they've designed this tool that is able to predict what people want to see, give them content that's similar to content they're viewing already, and in that way, able to hook users and keep them on the platform for longer. It's a product liability lawsuit. They're saying that you intentionally, knowingly, willfully designed your products to be harmful in this way and keep users on there as long as possible.
You know, we've covered Section 230 before on the show many times. It has the dubious distinction of being both pivotal and boring. Basically, the tech companies are saying, look, we are not a publisher. We're a common carrier like the phone companies. You're not going to come after the phone companies because somebody made an actionable phone call. But this time, it isn't boring because there really seems to be growing support from lawmakers across the spectrum for reforming or getting rid of Section 230. And then the companies could be accountable for whatever gets posted. A slur, a naked picture, hate speech, which sounds kind of wonderful, but it's also kind of chilling at the same time for free speech. This is a very big deal.
The way that the Section 230 applies in this case is that the lawyers are not allowed to argue about the content. It's not about whether the content on the platform itself contributed to her mental health harms, but about whether the platform and the way it is designed fed into these issues for Kaylee.
Tell me about the plaintiff's lawyer. He's a kind of razzle-dazzle guy, Mark Lanier. One of the most renowned plaintiff's attorneys in the country. He was involved in the opioid litigation. Give me the style of the guy and the approach.
So Mark Lanier has this folksy charm. Two of his daughters are actually attorneys with him, trying this case, sitting at the table with him, and he makes frequent references to them during the case. He's very personable, speaking directly to the jury. And one thing that I found noteworthy about his presentation is that he used a lot of props, more props than I've seen a lawyer use in a courtroom previously.
Like Gallagher, the comedian?
Exactly. At one point during his opening arguments, he's talking about what this case boils down to, and he says, it's as easy as ABC, and he pulls out 3 little children's blocks that have the lettering ABC on them, and he says, addicting the brains of children. That's the ABCs of this case. And similarly, while he's been questioning witnesses, he makes great use of this little overhead document camera that allows jurors and everyone in the room to see what he's writing on a piece of paper.
What he's writing is projected onto a screen?
Exactly. Taking notes of what the witness is saying while they're talking. And at the beginning of their testimony, he puts up a paper that has a drawing of a road and some signs on it. And he'll say, this is the road that we're going to go on during our testimony. And these are the stops that we're going to make along the way to try to help the jury understand the information that they're hearing.
So it seems some of the most damning evidence against Google and Meta are these internal documents written by their employees.
Right. So the plaintiffs are going to be relying a lot on emails and instant messaging between employees at these companies talking about the impact of their product on young users. During opening arguments, Lanier was talking about a chain of messages between a researcher at Meta and one of her colleagues. One of them said, Instagram is a drug. Another one replied, LOL, I mean all social media. We're basically pushers.
Then the response is, seriously, it is. We are causing reward deficit disorder because people are binging on IG so much they can't feel reward anymore. Like their reward tolerance is so high. And then the other person says, yeah, I was starting to think the same thing yesterday when you made that gambling reference. It's kind of scary. And then there's a sad face emoji. How do they respond?
Lanier has indicated that he plans to call executives from all of these companies. So we heard already in court this week from the head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri. We're also anticipating testimony from Mark Zuckerberg. There's a lot of interest in that day of testimony. From the CEO of YouTube, Neil Mohan. Those are the big names, but there's been indications that we're going to hear from other executives, maybe a little bit further down the food chain, who might have different insights to provide about what the company was thinking on a given issue.
So Adam Mosseri is the head of Instagram. He was questioned already? What happened?
A lot of the questioning from Mr. Lanier was about an email exchange that happened internally regarding Instagram's decision about whether to ban photo filters on its platform that include effects that can mimic cosmetic surgery. What we saw in some of these emails back and forth between executives as they were weighing this question is concern that these filters have a disproportionate impact on particularly vulnerable users, which would be teen girls who use photo filters more than anybody on the platform. There's a lot of references to body dysmorphia, how this might impact the self-view, but they ultimately decided to lift any ban of them except for those that explicitly promote plastic surgery on the platform.
Weren't there also some documents that showed some executives acknowledging that they were targeting children, trying to keep them on their sites as long as possible?
We got a little bit of a preview of some internal documents from both Meta and Google talking about the importance of teens and younger users on their platform. Some of that has been in connection to these youth-oriented versions of their product that they've started offering. And that's something that we heard from the companies as kind of a defense to some of these claims is that, we're creating these products geared specifically for young users and they're meant to be more safe. But there were documents that were shown talking about how the earlier that a young person is on the platform, the more likely they are to stay on the platform. So it's definitely a topic that was discussed by leaders at these companies at some point.
What is going to be the defense's main argument?
Their argument is that the mental health experiences that Kaylee was having, they were not caused by their platforms. They talked about medical records from Kaylee, from treatment she's had with therapists. We got to see excerpts from some of those. Kaylee had an incredibly challenging life. She had complicated family dynamics at home. She witnessed domestic violence. What the lawyers for these companies have been arguing is that if you took YouTube away from the equation, took Instagram away, would she still be suffering from the same mental health struggles that she is right now? And they argue that the answer is yes. So one thing that we heard from the lawyers about consistently as their defense was how little time they say that she was actually spending on these platforms. We heard from a lawyer for YouTube that looking at her viewership data, which they have access to going back to 2020, she was on average viewing YouTube every day for 29 minutes. She watched an average of about 4 minutes of videos that were suggested by autoplay, which is one of the features that her lawyers are taking issue with as being addictive. And then she also averaged about a minute spent watching YouTube Shorts, which are those newer vertically oriented videos that you see on YouTube.
That's incredibly short amount of time. And this is over years, that was the average?
That's the average over the past 5 years. That's what the lawyer for YouTube said. But then we also heard from Mr. Lanier, who said that her highest usage day on Instagram was recorded in March of 2022, and that was 16.2 hours in a single day spent on the platform. It's going to be up to the jury to decide what do those numbers actually mean, what value do they have in determining addiction and the culpability of these platforms.
Getting back to the defense, they also talked a lot about safety features. Yeah, you have all the constant notifications and the liking affecting the dopamine receptors in your brain. You can just turn it off. We have parental controls that can limit these features, they said, right?
That's right. What we heard from lawyers for these companies is that these tools are incredibly effective, but you have to use them. They were highlighting what they say are failures by Kaylee's mom to use these parental controls at all. They say there's no evidence that they were being used.
Our show has covered a lot of moral panics sparked by the rise of new technologies. I mean, did you know that novels were once considered very dangerous for young women because reading them could spur madness in their delicate minds? Comics spurred congressional hearings. All terrible for the young. But the lawyers representing Kaylee are claiming addiction. Is it akin to cocaine, or is it more like gambling? Both kinds of addictions, chemical and behavioral, can affect parts of the brain. What kind of addiction will the plaintiff's lawyers be arguing is being fostered by social media?
We're definitely talking about the clinical addiction category. To be clear, this does not represent all users. They're talking about a really specific subset of individuals that they say have become addicted to the platform. It's like Kaylee, who they say were particularly vulnerable because of trauma she's experienced in her past. People who had difficult experiences are more susceptible to addiction. That's one of the things that we heard from this expert. So this case is intended to be narrowly tailored to just these people that they say were suffering and experiencing this clinical addiction to social media.
You've been covering this issue for a while. What do you think's the most important thing that's going to come out of it?
The verdict. And I don't say that to be cute. This case is the first of its kind to go to trial. There's going to be interesting testimony. There's going to be interesting documents that give us some insight into what these companies were thinking. But the most important thing here is going to be what the jury says. This is an issue that we've been talking about for years as a society, as a culture, but this is the first time that it's actually going to be decided officially in court, and that's going to have impact on all these other cases and future efforts to address this issue or make changes in this space.
Madlin, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure to talk with you.
Madlin Mekelburg is a legal reporter at Bloomberg. So before we speculate on the future of the monopolies that own and tweak social media and the millions who cheerfully use them or abuse them or are abused by them, let's detour briefly into the meaning of addiction as applied to social media. First, how do you know you're addicted? Maybe you just have a bad habit.
People generally use what's called a symptom-based approach.
Ian Anderson is a neuroscience researcher at the California Institute of Technology.
Feelings of withdrawal or becoming restless or troubled if you've been prohibited from using the app, or compulsive urges to use it. Those symptoms of addiction have to be experienced quite frequently for something to qualify as a behavioral addiction. Those things aren't part of a habit. Habits are generally performed, especially when they become very strong, in response to the context in which they've been repeated in the past. So, for example, a smartphone, which is constantly with you all the time, the smartphone itself or the presence of the app icon on the screen or notifications can trigger a scrolling habit or a posting habit. Because they activate in response to cues, these really strong habits resistant to willpower. And it's quite likely that feeling like you can't control your behavior with willpower leads people to say, oh, I must be addicted to the app, even if their behavior is something that wouldn't rise to a clinical standard of social media addiction.
Anderson recently published a study of roughly 400 users of Instagram, about 18% of whom said they were pretty sure they were addicted. Only 2% actually were at risk of addiction. Why did so many users overestimate their problem? Part of it may have something to do with this.
We did a media analysis in our paper as well, and we found that social media addiction is mentioned about 100 times more in media articles than the phrase social media habit. If addiction is the term that you hear all the time, it starts to become normative. And that not only leads to people using the term, but maybe makes people also feel like that's the right term.
Thus, uneasiness about staring way too much at your phone, plus muddled media messages, inflate a bad habit into an addiction. And that's not good.
Our first study was looking at that overestimation. The second study was looking at what happened when people internalized the addiction narrative. So we had people read a text basically saying social media can be addictive based on the U.S. Surgeon General's warning that was released around the time we did the study. And what we found is that when you internalize this addiction narrative, it makes you feel less like you can control it, less like you're going to be able to control it in the future. And also it made people recall more failed attempts to control it in the past, which is really interesting. On top of that, it also made them blame themselves more for overusing the app, framing all heavy use as addiction. It's a potential harm and also might divert people from useful solutions that are based on habit science that we know can work.
Nevertheless, serious habits are seriously hard to break. All the research points to a real problem and not an unintended one.
What can be said certainly is that social media companies do design in order to build very strong habits of use. When you're building very strong habits, there is the potential for people to develop behavioral addiction, or at least the risk of it.
He doesn't want his research findings misconstrued.
The concern is that because we're arguing addiction is quite rare, they might try to use it as kind of a way to sell, oh, these products aren't harmful at all. I want to see the companies be held accountable for the harms that the designs of their platforms do. Habits can also have pretty negative consequences, and certainly people can be led to undesirable usage patterns, or dark patterns, as user interface designers often call them, even if they don't necessarily rise to the level of clinical social media addiction. That's something that I don't want to get lost in the discussion.
Ian Anderson is a neuroscience researcher at the California Institute of Technology.
Coming up, maybe you should grayscale your phone. All the kids are doing it.
This is On the Media.
On the Media is supported by Smalls. January is when we all try to reset. Why not extend that to your cat? It's 2026, so don't be feeding your cat like it's 1926. That's where Smalls comes in. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. Starting with Smalls is easy. Just share info about your cat's diet, health, and food preferences. Then Smalls puts together a personalized sampler for your cat. No more picking between random brands at the store. Smalls has the right food to satisfy any cat's cravings. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. Make 2026 your cat's healthiest year yet. For a limited time, because you're an On the Media listener, get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/OTM. One last time, that's 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/OTM.
On the Media is supported by SelectQuote. You've heard about life insurance, but did you know there's a good chance it's cheaper than you think? And also, the younger you are, the cheaper it is. Buying life insurance can be like hiring a bodyguard for your bank account after you're gone. SelectQuote works to take the guesswork out of finding the right life insurance policy, so you don't have to sort through dozens of confusing options on your own. Instead, one of their licensed agents will help to find the right policy at the right price for you, comparing plans from trusted, top-rated insurance companies to find a policy that fits your health, your lifestyle, and your budget. They also partner with companies that offer policies for people with conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart disease. Get the right insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at selectquote.com/OTM. That's selectquote.com/OTM today to get started. On the Media is supported by Dell. Have you been waiting for the perfect time to upgrade your tech? Good news, the wait is over. Dell Tech Day's annual sales event is here, and they're celebrating their best customers with fantastic deals on the latest PCs, like the Dell 14 Plus with Intel Core Ultra processors. They've also got incredible perks like Dell Rewards, fast free shipping, premium support, price match guarantee, and more. And while you're upgrading your PC, you may as well go all out, because they're also offering huge deals on their premium suite of monitors and accessories. You know what that means. That's right, you can get a whole new setup with amazing savings. Clearly, this is a sale you don't want to miss. Visit Dell.com/deals. That's Dell.com/deals.
No other organ brings together science and spirituality quite like the human brain.
Our thinking is very different from what we have imagined.
Studies about the brain are, at heart, studies about ourselves. So why, even after centuries of research, has the brain still remained such a stubborn and elusive mystery? I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. Listen to On Point for our special series, Brainwaves, wherever you get your podcasts.
This is On the Media. I'm Micah Loewinger.
And I'm Brooke Gladstone. As we've just heard, whether it be addiction or not addiction to social media is not really the question. The whole point in trying to name the problem, whether habit or addiction or nothing, is to fix it. Julia Angwin, investigative journalist and founder of Proof News, a nonprofit journalism studio, recently wrote about how she got a grip on her big, small screen problem. And we launched our conversation with a description of one of the big fixes she found.
I use something called grayscale, where I basically turn color off on my phone. It changed my behavior so dramatically that it's actually somewhat embarrassing. I mean, I was using more than 8 hours a day on my phone, and I'm not proud to admit that. When I switched to grayscale, it immediately dropped to 4 hours. And I've stayed on grayscale since, which is almost 4 or 5 months now. It hasn't gone back up. It just changed my relationship with my phone in the most positive way I could have imagined. I pick it up when I need to do something, but I have no feeling like I want to pick it up. I didn't really understand how strong that feeling had been until it went away. I felt like I had just been released from an addiction. So I understand why people use the language of addiction, because it did emotionally feel that way.
Anderson told us that one of the signs of addiction is experiencing withdrawal.
Yes. I didn't feel any withdrawal. I felt relief. I felt like embarrassed. I can't believe I was like a color addict. I realized there's something it does in your brain, which I don't totally understand. And now what happens is when I turn color on, I feel grossed out by it, and I have to turn the color off immediately.
What do you do with the 4 hours you just got back each day?
Well, of course, Brooke, I'm extremely productive.
I want to discuss, though, 2 other studies that address whether social media, if not addictive, is harmful. Australian researchers followed over 100,000 Australian adolescents across 3 years and found that the relationship between social media use and well-being, it's not linear. It's actually U-shaped. Children who use social media moderately have the best outcomes, while those who use it very much or not at all have worse outcomes.
I mean, I think that really speaks to something that I am always trying to remind people of. There are huge benefits to social media. People who are alone in a community, don't know how to find other people with similar views, can use social media to find their group. And we have forgotten that because there are so many toxic things that can happen also on social media.
Yeah, I remember those communities being created, and it was wonderful. And then you also realize that a lot of neo-Nazis who would be snubbed by their fellows and unable to express it and just had to sit in a bar crying over their beer, suddenly found a group of like-minded neo-Nazis.
Many types of communities have been able to form on the internet, and we're in the midst of a rise in right-wing populism around the world and authoritarianism, and you cannot really unlink that from this new medium. But I'm not sure I would want to go back to a time where we couldn't find people to communicate with online who are like-minded.
Now, the second study comes from researchers at the University of Manchester. They followed 25,000 11 to 14-year-olds over 3 school years and concluded that screen time spent on social media or gaming doesn't cause any mental health problems in teenagers whatsoever.
This is a really amazing finding because it really speaks to the fact that we are very unspecific when we talk about problematic phone usage. And the reality is people do a lot of different things on phones, right? They play games, they message their friends, they doom scroll. I spent, when I was a teenager, hours and hours and hours on the phone with my friends, which is probably the same maybe as somebody who's texting and messaging their friends all night on their cell phone. Nobody was saying there was like a problematic piece to it, although my parents were really upset with the overuse of the phone line. When we collapse it all into one thing called screen time, we are not looking at the underlying behaviors, and some behaviors are more problematic than others.
Most of us can recognize when both kids and adults overuse social media, it does cause harm, whether it's addiction or ingrained habit or just being in a perpetual state of rage. So let's talk about the tools, the remedies being used across the globe. In December, Australia instituted a social media ban for all kids under 16. I guess they ignored the results of that vast Australian study. It's been going on for about 2 months now, and there are heaps of reports of teens circumventing the ban within minutes via VPNs. And now the UK, France, some other countries are considering following Australia's lead. So what's at stake with using such a blunt force tool?
A ban based on age is in fact a requirement for everyone to prove their age, right? In order to do that, you often have to show some sort of identity, your driver's license or something. All of a sudden, we're in a world where you have to show some sort of identification to go onto a lot of the portions of the internet. And that is not a world that is very safe, because the idea of browsing the internet anonymously, reading whatever you want without any consequences, is actually fundamental to the freedom that the internet promised. There's this empowerment of being able to seek all this knowledge, just like we do in a library. Mm-hmm. When you go to a library and look at books, there's no record. Even if you check it out, every state in the United States has a library confidentiality law saying that they won't turn the records over. I want that same level of privacy for the things I read online. And these kinds of laws that Australia has passed threaten that in a very dangerous way.
Let me bring up another increasingly popular remedy, and that's phone bans in schools. 31 states and the District of Columbia have already instituted them. It seems like getting smartphones out of schools improves academic performance. And I saw a poll that found even the kids like it, or at least they don't hate it. What do you think about that?
Teachers and the studies I've seen of students say that the learning experience in the classroom is better without phones. Let's say that that's true. I still don't think that that means we should be passing laws about this. And here's the reason. Schools should be setting policies about behavior that don't involve law enforcement. We already have too much of the school to prison pipeline where students in vulnerable communities are over-policed for, quote, bad behavior in schools, and then that gets them into the law enforcement system. And so I don't know why we have to pass laws for this. Schools should just have a policy, which is fine.
You say that ICE goes into schools, seizes teachers, and you want kids filming that. But to do that, they need their phones.
Yes. Right now, our best weapon as citizens against state violence committed by ICE is filming them.
And I wanted to bring that up, but I still think if these surveys reflect the truth, that it would be, on the whole, better if their phones were put away when they're in school.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But it's just a question of under what conditions are they put away? Are they confiscated, put into weird bags that the kids can't get access to? Or is it just in the kids' locker? They can go get it at the end of the day. And there's also a difference in terms of the rules under which the school can access kids' phones. There are schools where they've had sort of enlightened policies, like we're not going to just take your phone to see if you were using it and scroll through it. And then there are schools where they're just taking them and doing inspections. Really what we need are really good school policies that are enlightened and take into account the Fourth Amendment issues about searching people's phones, the First Amendment issues about your ability to film the police, right? I think those things need to be taken account in these school policies.
Most of these tools, age verification before you can access social media, phone bans in schools, they are intended to protect kids from social media overuse. But you've argued, and I've thought this myself, that you're less worried about your teenage kids than about your parents.
I have had to prevent my dad from sending thousands of dollars in cash to somebody on the phone who convinced him, right? This is a man with a PhD. Seniors are being scammed so aggressively over the internet. And this harm is actually really well quantified. We know it. And the weird thing to me is that we're having this moral panic about kids while ignoring this huge population that is absolutely suffering right now. If we're going to think about how to mitigate harm online, we need to think about seniors as much as we talk about the kids. One thing I've noticed about my kids, they are much smarter.
Tell me about that. You've said that When you told them about going to grayscale, they sort of snorted and said they'd done that a while ago.
I know. It was actually really embarrassing. I had just learned about grayscale, and they were like, we literally did that years ago. I mean, it wasn't months. It was years. They have little apps to limit how much time they spend on different apps. I think there's a lot more we can do, but I would also say that we as individuals only can do so much. These companies that make these tools also have really abdicated their responsibility. There's things that we could demand of them if we had like a functioning legislature that would be really helpful too.
What would you start putting in the hopper to get these companies to be accountable?
Well, we need to break them up. We kind of got close in the last administration with some of the efforts by the Justice Department.
In one case, the decision went for Google.
Well, that case was complicated. Google was ruled a monopoly, but then the judge said that AI was going to provide enough competition that there was not a remedy needed, like a structural breakup. But it's also worth noting that these kind of battles take years. It took a long time for the public and courts to come around to breaking up Standard Oil. And so I think we're still in the midst of that fight, and it's still a really important goal because these companies control our entire information ecosystem. We have to break them up so that they have incentive to compete on quality. Right now, they don't have that incentive. There was a time when AT&T prevented us from having any innovations in phones, and we managed to break them up. I'm kind of a irrational optimist that I think we will get there eventually, even though I agree with you, there aren't that many signs on the ground right now.
Let's talk about infinite scroll. It's one of the design elements that most everyone says these apps ought to get rid of. EU regulators have said that this feature is, quote, most likely illegal. How does it work, and how do you get around it?
TikTok is sort of the canonical example, or Instagram, where you look at your feed, you see a video, it just goes to the next one and the next one, and there's never an end. You just keep scrolling. They want to keep you on the platform as long as possible to show you as many ads as possible. There's really no healthy reason why you would have that feature other than that. When we first started on social media, we just saw posts from our friends, and we had essentially chosen that feed. So I really think another intervention that would be super helpful for reclaiming our agency is to have our ability to tune our feeds. So on Blue Sky, you can choose. I have like a feed of just tech news. I have a feed of cat pictures. I have a feed of called Happy News. But I also think we should have the ability to just click a button on a post, like, I don't want to ever see something like this again, which, by the way, sometimes they offer you, but then it's not true. I keep going into my son's feed and clicking on the manosphere stuff, like, don't show me again, and then it's there the next day. But like a meaningful control over our algorithmic feeds, I feel like is also a really important intervention that we need.
As you've observed, there are potential consequences to some of these remedies, like age verification or social media bans. They can lead to an increase in unauthorized data collection or censorship or surveillance. So what's at stake for the future of the internet?
I mean, right now we're in a very dangerous time for the internet because it's such a powerful medium that we use to access basically every part of our life. All of that is gatekept by a few companies who can really turn off or turn on our ability to participate based on their whims. I don't know if you remember when Zoom cut off a Chinese dissident from being able to use Zoom because they were giving a favor to the Chinese government. We have these companies that can really mediate our citizenship, and that is very dangerous, especially as these companies have become more comfortable being very political. And so it's important for our democracy to regain control over our ability to communicate with each other without it being basically suppressed by one of these tech platforms.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you. This was a treat.
Julia Angwin is an investigative journalist and the founder of Proof News, a nonprofit journalism studio.
Coming up, Brooke, I'm going to bet $1 that our next segment is about prediction markets.
You win. This is On the Media.
On the Media is supported by Smalls. January is when we all try to reset. Why not extend that to your cat? It's 2026, so don't be feeding your cat like it's 1926. That's where Smalls comes in. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. Starting with Smalls is easy. Just share info about your cat's diet, health, and food preferences. Then, Smalls puts together a personalized sampler for your cat. No more picking between random brands at the store. Smalls has the right food to satisfy any cat's cravings. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. Make 2026 your cat's healthiest year yet. For a limited time, because you're an On the Media listener, get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/OTM. One last time, that's 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/OTM.
On the Media is supported by SelectQuote. You've heard about life insurance, but did you know there's a good chance it's cheaper than you think? And also, the younger you are, the cheaper it is. Buying life insurance can be like hiring a bodyguard for your bank account after you're gone. SelectQuote works to take the guesswork out of finding the right life insurance policy, so you don't have to sort through dozens of confusing options on your own. Instead, one of their licensed agents will help to find the right policy at the right price for you, comparing plans from trusted, top-rated insurance companies to find a policy that fits your health, your lifestyle, and your budget. They also partner with companies that offer policies for people with conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart disease. Get the right insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at selectquote.com/OTM. That's selectquote.com/OTM today to get started. On the Media is supported by Dell. Have you been waiting for the perfect time to upgrade your tech? Good news, the wait is over. Dell Tech Days annual sales event is here, and they're celebrating their best customers with fantastic deals on the latest PCs, like the Dell 14 Plus with Intel Core Ultra processors. They've also got incredible perks like Dell Rewards, fast free shipping, premium support, price match guarantee, and more. And while you're upgrading your PC, you may as well go all out because they're also offering huge deals on their premium suite of monitors and accessories. You know what that means. That's right, you can get a whole new setup with amazing savings. Clearly, this is a sale you don't want to miss. Visit Dell.com/deals. That's Dell.com/deals.
No other organ brings together science and spirituality quite like the human brain.
Our thinking is very different from what we have imagined.
Studies about the brain are, at heart, studies about ourselves. So why, even after centuries of research, has the brain still remained such a stubborn and elusive mystery? I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. Listen to On Point for our special series, Brainwaves, wherever you get your podcasts.
This is On the Media. I'm Brooke Gladstone.
And I'm Micah Loewinger. While lawyers and scientists are sorting through the long-term effects of so-called social media addiction, there's another beckoning glow coming from our screens.
So yesterday was Super Bowl Sunday, and some $1 billion or so was bet by Americans.
A big day for big bets for sure, but a smaller news item lurked behind the headlines. The Nevada Gaming Control Board reported the lowest dollar amount wagered with the state sportsbooks since 2016. And that's potentially because there are some new players in Vegas, companies like Kalshi and Polymarket. They're known as prediction markets and claim that they're more like the stock market than traditional betting, since you're wagering against other people rather than the house. And you can bet on all kinds of things, from the order of songs that Bad Bunny would play at the Super Bowl, to tomorrow's temperature, to a word that might come out of somebody's mouth.
Welcome back to the Grammys. Potato.
Trevor Noah.
If you had me saying potato on Polymarket, you just made a ton of money. So congratulations, Noah_22, whoever that is.
At a White House press briefing in January, 98% of traders wagered that Caroline Leavitt would speak for more than 65 minutes, only for her to say, with a quick glance at the clock,
"Thank you all very much. It's great to be back with you."
She hustled off the podium with just 27 seconds to spare. Sports betting exploded in the United States after a 2018 Supreme Court decision legalized online gambling. Polymarket and Kalshi sprung up in the aftermath, and recently both companies have made partnership deals with news organizations. Judd Legum is author of Popular Information, an independent newsletter dedicated to accountability journalism. After tuning into this brave new world of news gambling, he says that the Kalshi ticker has become a strangely normal part of CNN coverage.
In addition to whatever discussion is going on, you will see something at the bottom of the screen saying, what is the current state of the market on Kalshi? What is the price of, yes, the Democrats will take control of the House? Is it 50 cents? Is it 60 cents? Is it 75 cents? And integrated into the discussion, they'll talk about the movements in these prices and what the Kalshi market is predicting.
Harry Enton, who was a kind of polling whiz kid in his former life at 538, now will pull up Kalshi odds and report on them as if they have explanatory power when talking about serious news events. Here he is in January talking about Trump's attempts to strong-arm control of Greenland.
What about the prediction markets? Yeah, are people in the public taking it seriously? The people who are putting their money where their mouth is, they're absolutely taking it seriously. I mean, take a look here. The chance that Trump buys any of Greenland by the end of his term, on Friday, it was just 12%. Whoa, way up there now to 36%, a tripling in less than a week.
They are promoting gambling on the seizure of a sovereign nation in this case, right? Not only is that just trivializing what should be treated as an absolutely insane news story, but why would, journalistically speaking, why would a news organization privilege the opinions of a group of random people?
I think that this is part and parcel, especially in Trump's second term, of news organizations to, at all times, avoid accusations of bias. So if you were to talk about, well, what are the implications of either invading or, strong-arming Denmark to give up some of Greenland, how would that impact the world? You might be seen as biased. But if you're simply discussing the numbers, just the data, you can insulate yourself from that.
Of course, CNN is not alone. The Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Yahoo Finance, Sports Illustrated, and Time, they have all inked deals with sites like Polymarket and Kalshi. What is in it for them to push a gambling addiction onto their viewers?
Well, why have the sports leagues adopted this so enthusiastically? Because I think they understand that if you have even $20 wagered on a game, you are more likely to tune in. So I think news organizations that have seen their readership or viewership decline see this as a way of creating more loyal viewers or readers.
You quote Kalshi CEO Tarek Mansour, who said, quote, Kalshi is replacing debate, subjectivity, and talk with markets, accuracy, and truth. In effect, you write, Kalshi's betting market being treated as news is based on the efficient market hypothesis. What do you mean by that?
There is a school of thought, something that has been adopted by Peter Thiel and some of the funders of these betting markets, that in fact it is the marketplace that is the clearest path to discovering what truth is.
But as you write in your piece, a lot of these markets, although they may appear to carry a hefty tag, we're talking about market caps of millions of dollars, they're nothing close to, say, the size of the stock market.
That's right. Probably the presidential market, who's going to win in 2028, that's going to be a fairly large market. But as you go down to a congressional race, or as you go down to some of these more obscure news events, or even things like, will the announcer during this sporting competition say a particular word? These are going to be very small markets. And what the price of a certain outcome is really has no relationship to truth or even probability. It just relates to how much a handful of individuals who have access to wealth have decided to put down in this market.
Okay, but if we had, Kalshi's CEO sitting with us here, he may say something like, well, look at our track record. Prediction markets picked Trump to win the 2024 presidential race. They supported Zohran Mamdani's odds for the New York City mayoral race in 2025. Is there not some predictive power on display here? Or are you skeptical of the examples and data that have been cited thus far?
I don't think that there is nearly enough data. These sites are so new that you can draw any conclusions about their accuracy. Look, they deal with binary questions. They're either right or wrong. They're either predicting an outcome or not. And so they're going to be right some of the time. Does that mean they're better at predicting something than some other methodology, maybe traditional polling or other things? That I don't think we could possibly know. But I think the larger question, especially when it comes to news, is why do we need to predict these things in the first place?
Because we have to know.
Why is it necessary to have a prediction market on will the government be funded by next week? Next week will come and we will know. Isn't it more important to spend that time talking about what are the issues that people are talking about that need to be resolved before the government can be funded?
You argue that these betting markets are still small enough to be disrupted by individuals. How so?
So if you look at Kalshi, there's $50 billion in annual volume. That's about $135 million per day. But if you break that down further, this is spread across thousands of different markets. So once you look at, for example, a market about a special election in Tennessee, it's just going to be a few $1 million at most, probably less than that in many cases. And therefore, anyone who's interested in changing the narrative in the context of elections on any level, this can be done now on Kalshi for tens of thousands, even thousands of dollars.
Our producer, Becca, actually observed this example while looking at Kalshi before one of Fed Chair Jerome Powell's press conferences in January. There was a mention market, so betting on what words he would use during his remarks and the following Q&A, and a commenter in Kalshi's chat posted a few minutes before the conference went live that there was a script out and that Powell was going to utter the phrase national debt and that fellow bettors should hammer it. Needless to say, Powell didn't end up uttering those words, but perhaps someone made a killing betting against that he would say it. In small ways, it's not hard to see how easy it is to make a profit by manipulating people you're betting against.
Yeah, and that example illustrates the problem where you have markets where there is a number of people who know exactly what the outcome will be in advance. And although Kalshi has rules against insider trading, it's far from clear that they have any way to enforce those rules.
Yeah, recently, MS Now host Chris Hayes posted a video to social media talking about the betting market that emerged around what topics he would bring up in his interview on Stephen Colbert's show. NPR's Bobby Allen alerted him.
And that market, which when Bobby first sent it to me was like at $22,000, goes to this. $800,000, almost $900,000. Like close to $1 million market.
And as Hayes discussed in his video, the interview with Stephen Colbert was pre-recorded, meaning Chris Hayes, someone in the studio audience, a producer working on the CBS segment. Anyone with inside knowledge could have made a killing in this market by just betting before the interview aired. Just another example of potential insider trading. An anonymous bettor
bet $32,000 that the Venezuelan president would be out of power by January 31st. The following morning at 4:21 a.m. Eastern, the president announced Maduro was in custody, and that user cashed out, making more than $400,000.
Another user made over $1 million betting on what the top Google searches would be in 2025, which raised suspicions that this was an internal Google employee with prior knowledge of the data. But aren't there mechanisms and a regulatory system aimed at combating this exact kind of fraud?
Well, that's right. There is a mechanism by the SEC that is aimed at preventing insider trading. Unfortunately, the SEC is not involved in regulating these markets at all. It's the CFTC, which regulates commodities and futures markets, and they have no history of regulating insider trading. In fact, those markets traditionally are used by insiders to hedge their risk in the future, and it's completely acceptable.
It's legal and even normal to act on inside information?
Yeah, let's say that I'm Frito-Lay, and I'm going to be coming up with a new, what I suspect might be very popular version of Doritos, which is going to require a lot of corn. And I know I'm going to need to buy an immense amount of corn 6 months from now to make these new Doritos. I can then use the corn futures market to lock in the current price to hedge against any disruption that my own purchases might make. And that's seen as a legitimate and prudent use of the futures markets. So it's a totally different mindset than the SEC, where using that kind of insider information, trading, your own stock because you know of some new initiative that your company is going to do that you think is going to be very profitable, is prohibited.
So because Kalshi and Polymarket are regulated by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and not the SEC, there isn't really a mechanism for enforcing insider trading?
Well, there's still prohibitions against fraud, right? So you could argue that you're committing fraud against the other people in the market by using insider information because you're participating as if you are on the same level ground as everyone else. The real issue becomes the fact that the CFTC has no experience, no staff, no ability to really enforce those kinds of laws, unlike the SEC, which has been doing this for decades and decades and decades.
Of the three big issues with this industry, you list manipulation, insider trading, and trivialization. This feeling that betting on very serious current events kind of flattens the news. I agree with you that there's something a little sick on making money on these events, but hasn't that ship already sailed?
I think there's always been two aspects to news. There's certainly always been sort of the entertainment and voyeurism aspect. We want to know where celebrities are vacationing. We want to know about affairs. And that's not a new thing. That's been going on probably since the invention of news. But the question is there a place anymore for another kind of news? Because certainly there's another tradition where news is an essential part of people's ability to inform themselves as citizens, to decide who they might want to vote for, who they might want to donate to, what they might want to protest, how they might want to live their lives in light of what's going on around them. And what you have with Kalshi is it is essentially invading those spaces and turning the news into this game to essentially de-emphasize the part of news that is probably the most important, which is that it's about informing yourself as a citizen.
Judd, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Judd Legum is the author of Popular Information, an independent newsletter dedicated to accountability journalism. That's it for this week's show. On the Media is produced by Molly Rosen, Rebecca Clark-Callender, and Candice Wong. Travis Mannon is our video producer.
Our technical director is Jennifer Munson, with engineering from Jared Paul. Eloise Blondio is our senior producer, and our executive producer is Katja Rogers. On the Media is produced by WNYC. I'm Brooke Gladstone.
And I'm Micah Loewinger.
I'm Ira Flato, host of Science Friday. For over 30 years, our team has been reporting high-quality news about science, technology, and medicine. News you won't get anywhere else. And now that political news is 24/7, our audience is turning to us to know about the really important stuff in their lives. Cancer, climate change, genetic engineering, childhood diseases. Our sponsors know the value of science and health news. For more sponsorship information, visit sponsorship.wnyc.org.